live with Lance Brozdowski. What's going on, everyone? And thank you for being patient with us because Mr. Lance was on a very important business call with Mr. Ryan Brasier. How did that go, brother?
It was good. Yeah. We just got a little one-on-one. Usually when guys like come into orgs, they do like little press conferences and stuff. So some of the writers were there and stuff, but we get a one-on-one with Marquis. So he seems like a good, cool guy. From the South, and he's from Texas.
Oh,
He
is
chucks
he?
baseballs and he's good. I mean, some of these guys are just they are what they are, and I enjoyed it. The thing that I learned actually though is that I didn't know he played with Seiya Suzuki in 2017 in
I
Hiroshima.
didn't know that either. I saw a
Yeah,
note about that. What?
it's cool.
How? Because is he time? Was that in the World Baseball Classic or where did he
No, he
play?
was in Japan for a year.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I didn't know that either because there's kind of a gap if you hop to his baseball reference from like 2013 to 2017 or something like a couple years.
Okay.
I think it was the injuries and then international, whatever. But yeah, no, I was like, oh, it's kind of a cool nugget. I think Sayed popped like 26 homers and was in the MVP race over there. So
Well, let's
didn't
let's
have
have
any like
that.
crazy stories about him, but definitely lauded how good he was as a hitter. So
Let's have Seiya in the MVP race and
that'd be
Ryan
great.
Brasier as a reliever of the year candidate here in the states. How about that?
That sounds
Um,
amazing.
hey, we gotta give a congratulations before we get started here. Mr. Lance has become an engaged man. You're
I
coming to
know.
the good side. Congratulations,
Yeah.
man.
Thank you. Appreciate it, dude. Yeah. It was a fun moment. We were out in southern Chile in Patagonia, so it was like a big trip. My
Wow,
reset before the season, which wasn't as much of a reset given you're trying to transport a very valuable item cross borders. So,
that's
you know
stressful.
what I mean?
That's
It's definitely
stressful.
stressful. Yeah. Well
Oh
worth it.
man. Well, hey, before we get to it and before we get to everyone's questions, we've got to give a nice introduction to a new face, Mr. Ty Lewan. And Ty from Arizona. We're gonna be hanging out in Arizona starting on Friday. But excited to have you on the team, man. And why don't you tell everyone how you became a Cubs fan?
Yeah, so thank you so much, and really excited to be here for this discussion and everything. But just a little background on me: grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, in a town called Sleepy Hollow. So shout out Sleepy Hollow, and grew up there 18 years before moving out to Colorado, then Arizona. But as a Cubs fan, it started from day one. My father basically, kind of like Alex said on one of the last episodes, which was it was pretty non-negotiable, and I'm very happy that it was that way. And so been a Cubs fan ever since, and been a huge supporter of this show and other Cubs obviously channels. And so to see an interview with Lance being on my first show, I mean, this is the big leagues. I'm ready for this opportunity
Staff it.
and super excited. So thanks.
Well, and just so people know, like we got introduced with because of Matt Cozy over at Locked On, which you've been on that show as well. So you have great knowledge of the Cubs. You have a lot of really cool things that you're gonna be bringing to the team, and I'm really excited to have you on, man.
Appreciate it, brother. Yep, very excited. And like I said, shout out to Matt. Obviously, him and Sam have been obviously amazing in the Cubs space as well. And so being able to work now with you guys is just going to be a lot of fun. So look
Awesome.
forward to it.
All right. Well, glad to have you on to moderate the comments and everything. And we are going to go ahead and get to it with Lance about the bullpen. Let's start with the bullpen and then we'll go into spring training. But I guess the biggest hot topic right now is the Ryan Brasier situation. So go ahead and if you can just give us a little bit of a breakdown of what you know about Ryan Brasier. What's he going to bring to the Cubs? And for those of you that are listening live, yes, comment with your questions, but also do me a favor right now, pause and just copy that link with this live, retweet it, post it wherever you are popular on socials, wherever you want to, because we want more people in this room asking more questions to Lance. We got him for another 35 minutes here. So Lance, Ryan Brasier, give it to us.
Yeah. I did a breakdown on him actually in 2023 on my YouTube channel, where he was bad. He was really bad versus left-handed hitters with Boston in that season to start, and then he ended up. Did he get traded? I don't remember off the top of my head whether he's DFA'd or traded or whatever happened. Jump over to the
Right.
Dodgers, and they gave him a cutter, and basically immediately started throwing that thing. He really pushed the usage at the end of that year. So if you like split up first half, second half for him in 2023 and look at his usage, you'll see that cutter jump up. And that like really started to neutralize left-handed hitters for him because that was always his problem. I feel like with the bullpen rules and everything, it's become much more that you need weapons to face both handedness of hitters, no longer the loogies of the world. And Brasier was always good versus right-handed hitters because he's got a good slider, throws it hard. It's like 85-ish or so. Good shape. That's always been his MO, but he just got pummeled by righties because his fastball shape wasn't great. So that adjustment was big for him. And then in 2024, the cutter stuck. He pulled down the fastball usage a bit more and started throwing the slider even more. And he's been able to stave off like any kind of, I'd say, like contact quality regression that maybe the league started to adjust and understand what he was doing with the fastball cutter. I feel like that's always a big thing. Sometimes you'll see adjustments in one year and it's like, can't wait for that guy to do the exact same thing in the subsequent season. And it's like, well, the league is going to spend the entire offseason understanding what you just did. So you probably need to make another adjustment just to maintain your performance. That's always something I think is a bit underrated, where you just like assume an adjustment a guy made in a prior season will allow him to take his second half and multiply it by 2. It's like, yeah, it doesn't usually work like that. So Brazier's done a really good job, I think, of just adapting late in his career. Contact neutralizer, you're not going to get a ton of Ks, but the Cubs like this kind of more off barrel approach. We've seen this with guys like Assad and Porter Hodge, a variety of these guys, where they're not going to put up gaudy K numbers. It's more, you're not going to barrel off them. And I think that's kind of maybe where the modern bullpen is pushing. Like, obviously you want the Tanner Scotts of the world who are going to do everything, but if you can't get Tanner Scott, then like you have to kind of piece it together with guys who don't have that strong of a K rate, but have similar peripherals from a contact quality standpoint.
Cool. Where do you see him fitting in to this bullpen right now? Do you think that this is okay, Presley's in the 9th, and depending on the matchups, it's Hodge or Brasier in the 8th, or do you see Brasier as more like a 6th, 7th inning kind of gap guy?
I would bet he gets the majority of his innings 7th and 8th, and Presley takes the majority of the 9th. I could see situations where maybe they like Hodge in matchups a bit better versus some righties and stuff, but I don't feel like, I'm trying to think, like most of the division isn't really super righty heavy. So I bet that he gets mostly 7th and 8th. I think I'm most interested to see Eli Morgan's usage. That's a name that like I liked when they acquired, but I feel like we just haven't talked about him a lot because
Right.
you just have a lot of other things that are relevant in terms of what have happened with the Cubs specifically. But Morgan is an interesting one because he could go multiple innings. I wonder whether he's more like a 6th to 7th guy, where you're bringing him in situations where the starter goes 5 1/3, then he's able to do an up down, where he pitches the end of the 5th and into the 6th. But I also think he's kind of a sneaky leverage guy because of how good the changeup is versus lefties. So maybe there's situations where you run into like a pocket of righties and you go like Hodge Brasier early, and then Morgan gets like more of a hold in like the 8th or so. I'm kind of fascinated to see like the construction of the bullpen, but I think it's a good problem, not problem.
Yeah.
It's a good topic to talk about when you now have the 9th locked down with Presley. It's just like, okay, let's see how the other pieces fall. I don't think there's really a right answer. And I imagine maybe some guys will pop more than others. Hodge takes a step forward, he solidifies himself as the 8th. Maybe he takes a step back and he's more like a 6th, 7th guy. They have a couple pieces they can move around now, as opposed to needing Hodge to throw 70 innings and save 35 games. It takes a little pressure off him.
So it's crazy because we literally have gone from, in a matter of 7 or 8 days, Porter Hodge is our closer, to now like, wow, Porter Hodge might be the 7th inning guy. Like,
I know.
Which is, like you said, a good thing. It's not a problem. It's not an issue. It's actually a good thing that the Cubs have this now. It leads me to my next question, which is really what I asked Ben Brown and what I want to ask you now. When we look at, as you're seeing on your screen here, we have the 40-man roster up, and there's one main question that I have in regards to this 40-man roster, which is, where does Ben Brown fit in? Like, here's where I'm at. So we know our 4 starters, at least the first 4 starters. You got Steele, Imanaga, Tyone, and Matt Boyd. Then it's kind of this like, okay, 5th starter, there's Ray, there's Assad, there's Wicks, maybe there's Ben Brown. However, from my perspective, it's like, well, after that neck injury and the fact that like maybe some just extra wear and tear, maybe they want to kind of ease him in back into 2025, and maybe it'll be bullpen, maybe it'll be 2 or 3 innings at a time. So that means it's a bullpen situation for him. Well, I mean, Lance, there's not many guys with options. When you look at, let's just take it from the top here. Julian Merriweather doesn't have any options. Tyson Miller, Eli Morgan. You got, I think Nate Pearson is out of options. I could be wrong there. That's 4 guys right there. You got Colin Ray or Javier Assad is probably going to be in the 5th spot there in the bullpen. Thielbar, that's 6. I'm missing someone. I think I must have scrolled over them. I mean, Brasier and
Yeah.
Presley, that's 7 and 8. Brasier and Presley is 7 and 8. So where's the room?
It's a great question. Yeah, I think it leads maybe to a larger discussion of like how they actually utilize the starter. Again, I think somewhat these discussions are futile because you never know what's going to happen in spring when it's like, oh,
Sure.
this guy, is just he's behind and he's going to miss April, and we're just like, okay, that answers all of our questions at once, so to speak. Those things always pop up, so I always try to not get too deep in like the mechanisms of like what exactly is the roster right now. But you do make a good point. Like there are probably 6 to 7 guys in there that have to be on the opening day roster almost. And I think the proper approach, from my understanding of how guys are stretched and ramped up, is generally that it's easier to taper down a guy's workload as opposed to accelerate it. So I think what we're gonna see, I would bet, if you want to like guess how the tone is of Carter and Jed and Tommy Hotovy, et cetera, as the season gets going in spring, as we start to see some of these interviews, the reports in 4 days and stuff. What you're gonna hear is like it's an open competition for the 5th starter, and all these guys are probably going to be stretched to like 2 to 3 innings, 4 innings over time, and then maybe we'll see injuries maybe tamper them down and stuff. But that is probably the correct approach. At the end of the day, to me, it just kind of feels like Ray's the 5 already, in my opinion. I just feel like veteran presence. He's a guy that I think will be ready for Japan. Like he probably knows his timetable and workload a little bit better. So like he's just going to be ramped to be ready and be quick. And like if they need 3 innings off the top in Japan and they want to split up and not have someone true start there, which we saw a bit with the Padres and Dodgers last year, just in terms of like full season workload, doesn't really make a lot of sense to have Steele go out and pitch 8 innings in Japan, a month earlier than you normally expect him to do so. So like they'll split up, I imagine, those Japan starts and stuff into like multiple outings. In which case maybe they need, 3 innings of Wicks, 3 innings of Assad, 3 innings of Ray, and split that up among Shota and Steele, etc. Or I don't know how they do it. Maybe they just piggyback the 4 starters we're talking about and go 3 and 3 or whatever. But we'll see. I'm not trying to get too over my skis here, but I guess this brings back to the point that I want to make is I like Ben Brown as a starter. Ben Brown's a starter to me. Like I think that I've always thought that. I bet there's some kind of change up split in there for him. I know he's been primarily like a 2-pitch guy, but like there's definitely capacity for a change up or split. The curveball to me is good enough to work versus either handedness because of its shape, pretty platoon neutral pitch. I get most excited about him being a 5. I unfortunately I don't think get amped up about Ray or Assad or any of these other guys being a 5.
No.
Like I just think the upside there is just to get innings at a league average rate. If they're 4 ERAs over 100, 120, that's fantastic. If they end up 4.2, 4.3, it's like, okay. But like Brown is the guy you plug in, and if you could get him to a workload high enough, maybe he only throws 120 this year. He's got a chance to post like a low 3.2 with like a massive K rate. That gets me excited. Like you're trying to catch some upside, I think, with this rotation as it currently stands. And you do that if you expect a little bit of regression from Shota, which I do, from the home run rate. If the park plays a little more neutral at Wrigley, like I think those homers are going to catch up to him. I doubt he's sub 3 again. Let's say he's more 3.5. It's like you think of the sliding scale. It's like, okay, he comes up to 3.5. Like you kind of need someone else to come down. And
Sure.
Brown is the guy that I'm most confident in going out there and like putting up 2 months of a 3.2 ERA. I just don't see that coming from some of the other guys. So I don't know if the organization agrees with me. I would bet they kind of don't, and maybe they see Brown as a guy that goes down to AAA and stays stretched, or maybe they use him as more of a bullpen piece because they like the velo, and if he jumps up a tick in leverage, next thing you know, you have another 7th, 8th inning option. I don't know what your thoughts are, but I've always thought of Ben Brown as a starter.
Well, I'll also say I expect regression from Jameson Taillon. I don't think he's a 3.2 ERA guy, and I will say Ben Brown, I would rather have 50 appearances of 1 to 2 innings of Ben Brown and know that he's healthy from the start of the season to the end than what we had last year, which was, he was, and I know you said you haven't listened to the interview yet, but he was dealing with that neck thing from pretty much day one. And so to me, like if he's dealing with that from day one, what could have been possible just as 1 inning every couple of days? Could he have maybe lasted longer? Could he have been in a higher leverage kind of situation? Whereas maybe that wear and tear really was the reason why we didn't see him again after whatever it was. I think June was the last time we saw him pitch. So I would rather
That's a
have
good point.
a healthy Ben Brown in leverage situations where you can pick and choose than 2 months of Ben Brown, I guess is my point.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I guess I just like I'm always like seeking more more from a guy. Like I don't think I just want Ben Brown for
Yep.
50 innings. Like I think I want Brown for 100,
I want the same
You know,
thing.
how do I get there?
I want the same thing. I just think that this is a good year for it to be like, hey, let's kind of like ease Ben Brown, the Brandon Woodruff / Corbin Burns kind of approach of, okay, let's start him off in the bullpen. Okay, he's passing that test. Now let's stretch him out a little bit, maybe a spot start here and there. Okay, now he's passed that test. Come July, now he's a 5th starter. Maybe I'm too conservative, but I feel like, especially with what Ty had alluded to earlier, you know, when I asked Ben, hey, are you healthy? You know, his response was not, yes, I'm healthy. His response was, I'm doing everything a healthy person would do, which kind of is like, what does that mean?
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, there's just a lot of reasons why I'm like, maybe bullpen. Anyway, that's where I stand on it.
That's fair. No, I totally see your perspective. I guess it's funny. I'm like the pitching guy, but I tend to be a little more aggressive with projecting pictures. I'm kind of just like this. Like
you're like, they're gonna get hurt anyway. Why don't we just do it now?
That honestly is probably where it comes from. You know, it's like I'm not gonna baby the guy. Like if he's healthy right now, let me try to get 100, 120 out of him, so we could actually get him to like 150 next year. Like if you throw him for 50 this year, like I'm not. He'd have to do this steal where he stays in Arizona for the entire offseason for the organization, I imagine, to be confident in him pushing like another 70 innings plus, you know, like those jumps are intimidating. Like if you're don't have your fingerprint on the guy the entire offseason, like the Cubs did with Steele, then I don't think they're going to be totally confident in pushing Ben Brown to 120 plus, which means that if you only have him for 50, 60, then we're looking at like 2027 is the first year you push him over 120. Like, nah, just let me do that right now. Let's see what he's got. So I don't know. I get your point, but I guess I'm the aggressor in this situation.
Well, the other thing I was just about to ask Lance was, you know, with the situation they're in now, if you look at the front three, feel very confident, of course, with Steele, Imanaga, and Tyone from a, you know, health standpoint. Obviously, Steele's last year was a freak injury, but generally speaking, a health standpoint, we feel very confident in them. Would putting Ben Brown in the 5th starter position be better just because of the concerns over Matthew Boyd's health, just because that has been something that a lot of people have been concerned over, especially with the amount of money he got? Is this, you know, would you rather just see Brown get that opportunity right away, so then in case, you know, Boyd goes down, we have that arm on the back end of that rotation?
Yeah, perhaps. Maybe that's more reason to option Brown down and stretch him as a starter, you know, where it's like you're kind of maybe wasting some bullets at AAA, but you at least have him as like the next man up, where if a Tyone or a Boyd or a Ray gets hurt early, you have him right there ready to go. And it's like, oh, cool, this will be impact. It's not going to be a filler for a couple starts, you know, that we're just trying to tread water with. So I don't know if it'd be reason to make him the 5. It might be more reason for me to have him be one of the first guys option that you then aggressively stretch, and he's throwing 5 to 6 innings in April such that he's ready. And then you use like a Birdsell or a Horton late in the year as more of like we need late bullets now, and these guys are stretching, pitching well. Let's see what they have. And then they become that late season kind of dance. But I mean, I got to admit, like this year I think it's going to be, I don't want to say tricky. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do from like I always talk about like the pie of innings, like that 1,400 innings or so you got to throw over the course of the season, how they break that up. I imagine they're going to have internal projection numbers on like how comfortable they are pushing guys from an inning standpoint. I mean, if you remember 2 years ago, maybe last year, I'm mixing up the years, 2 years ago, I think 2023, coming off a year with the pitch, that was the first year with the pitch clock, right? I'm remembering this correctly. Mm-hmm. First year with pitch clock, right? That I thought it was going to have some effect on guys' workload. Like you're just taking off rest and compounding that over time. And the Cubs bullpen broke down really late there. And my understanding was a lot of people internally were like, this is going to happen. And I don't necessarily know whether there was a ton of I just think it was a problem they pushed down the road, perhaps. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? It's hard to attack up front. It's just that came back to bite them. And I imagine that's not going to happen again for this coming season. So I think they're going to be very deliberate with like, how are we comfortable pushing Boyd? Like if our pie on Boyd is that he can throw a max of 150 innings, and we expect to make the playoffs, we're going to need him for 15 in the playoffs. So, like, there you go. He's at 135, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like you then turn it almost into what the Dodgers have done each of the last couple of years, where you have, like, no pitcher eclipse 140. Now, I don't think that's going to be the case with the Cubs, but I'm talking more about, like, the peripheral pieces here, like Boyd, Ray, Assad, Wicks, Brown, like, all these guys. Like, what are their inning totals, and how confident are you in them come October when this team should be playing baseball?
Yep. absolutely. Well, there's just so many guys now too. I mean, Jed went out.
Yeah,
and got
which is a good problem.
everyone,
Yeah.
it's a really good problem. And then along with Tyler Zombro, who we, by the way, you need to help us coin this. He is the pitching prophet. That is the name that
I
we're
like
going
that.
with.
I like that. It's good. He's the
We
man.
had
Yeah,
the
Tyler's the dude.
professor, we had the pitching philosopher.
Yeah.
Now we have the pitching prophet. But anyway, with his help, I mean, like I think there's going to be an issue of like, wow, AAA is loaded, or like, hey, these guys had a really good spring, but I don't know where to put them. So anyway, I want to transition. First, before we do, make sure you go follow and subscribe to Lance's YouTube channel. It is in the comments. Ty is putting it there right now. And it's also right there up on your screen. It's just youtube.com/@LanceBroz, BROZ. Lance, Alex Bregman, and then we're going to get to questions from the fans. Alex Bregman, man, I didn't think there was a shot. I didn't think that was. I thought it was all just like, okay, John Heyman and all of them are just trying to, they're working with Boris, and Boris is saying, say that the Cubs are in so that these other guys will go. But now it's like, okay, Tigers don't seem like a viable option. Astros apparently are already talking about Bregman in past tense. And by the way, a little side note, I did have Matt Shaw on today. That interview is going to be tomorrow. And I did ask him about the whole, like, hey, what if Alex Bregman comes in, and what's that mean for you, and how are you approaching this spring training? So make sure you go watch that interview. It was a lot of fun. I don't really.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that. Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
He's a good dude.
It feels like it's maybe Cubs or Red Sox at this point. Like I don't really know who else he would sign with.
I think the Tigers are in there. I think the Arenado to Red Sox rumors make a little more sense. I saw something today that said that there seemed to be some structure of a deal around the Astros. I'm not entirely sure who this came from, so I'm not sure if it's like a Chandler Rome credible source, but there was some rumor around, like, I think Arenado has some bit of veto power around where he goes, and like didn't want to go to the Astros from what it seems. Like, quote me on this. And then now with the Red Sox, it's like he would be highly motivated to go there. So like, if they see that more as a chip with their farm system and they don't want to pay Bregman, like that could be the angle to take on a guy like Arenado, especially with where the Cardinals are in terms of just like not really trying this year much. But yeah, Breg's, I'm surprised, man. The tenor I got early in this offseason was that, like, I didn't really think they were going to spend a ton of money.
Right.
I thought they were going to come in pretty hard on the luxury tax. So if I'm confident to some extent that information I got was true. So if that is still true, then this contract must be like really weird, like I don't know what it could be. Like I would imagine the club would love to leave it to Jed. I would imagine the club would have options, but like those are always so hard to work into contracts to give like the team the initiative, where it's like, you price that into the contract, you're going to be paying what, $26 million in this year for him to cover the potential that he kind of phases out. Player option, you're going to run into another scenario like Bellinger, which I could see, but then you also introduce the probability that like he's just traded in a year or something along those lines. But I still, it makes a lot of sense. Like I remember you asked me on a live, I think maybe 2-3 weeks ago, like, would you rather have Bregman or Shaw third? And the answer is Bregman. It's not close, but I still think Shaw's a great player. And like, I'm very, very curious to see his development. It's just, you're talking like surefire off the bat. This guy's going to be 10 to 15%, 20% above the league average hitter. Whereas like Shaw might struggle. Like, it's just, that's what we've seen from guys coming up. So the domino pieces around Bregman, or we could discuss another time, but yeah, like this would make the team, it would push this projection probably up. Shaw's projected pretty aggressively, so it's not going to be like a 3-4 win jump for the org from like the sports books or Pacoda or whatever you want to look at, but it's going to jump him probably a win or two, like Pacoda had him at like 90.6. That probably jumps to 91.6. I imagine, I think the line right now is about 86 wins for this team on sportsbooks. You could actually put some money down and get skin in the game and stuff. And it's like, I imagine that pushes to 86.5, 87. Like you're going to start to see some momentum there. And I don't really think there's anybody else on the market that would move it a win or two. I think Bregman's the only piece that would do that. I think even if they signed Flaherty, it wouldn't have moved much. So yeah, this is a huge piece. I mean, it kind of seems like the momentum's in the Cubs' favor. I'm surprised. Like I'm fascinated to see what the contract looks like.
I still, like the contract is what it comes down to, because without going too deep into this, like the math doesn't math unless Nico leaves. And even if Nico leaves, it's not to me going to be to bring back a stud pitcher like everyone has been hoping for, because right now they're at 211. They add in Bregman. I've been hearing 28 is probably the number if you're going to do one of these short-term 3 or 4 year deals. So then that brings them to 239. That's $2 million away from the luxury tax. And we all know how like much of a holy grail that Tom treats the luxury tax as. And so like, would they go into a season $2 million behind it? I don't think so. And so then you got to trade away Nico. Well, if you trade away Nico, there goes 11 million, brings you back down to 228. So again, like the idea that so many experts out there have had is that the Cubs want to be around like that 230 to 231, 232 mark going into the season. So like give away Nico in a trade. What are you getting back? Prospects? Or you just going to like someone threw the name out, Clark Schmidt. I think I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, that's a Cub style pitcher. I mean, he's very similar to like Hayden Wesneski in ways, and they targeted him. They had a relationship with the Yankees. How about this? How about you trade Matt Shaw for Dylan Cease? Would you do that?
Well,
pick up Bregman.
But that again, like that's what I'm saying is if you do that, then now we're over the luxury.
Yeah,
tax.
That's true.
You know,
but that
like,
would make sense. You give up a piece like Shaw, then the Padres eat money there. You know, or like otherwise, if they don't want to get any money, then like you're not going to get Shaw. So
yeah.
I don't want to trade Shaw, but I'm just saying like that.
I don't trade away Shaw for 1 year of Cease. I don't do it.
He's what, 2 or 1?
1.
He's only 1. Okay, I thought he was 2. I got that mixed up. Michael King
is
is 2, right?
2, I'd consider it. 1.
So
no.
Michael King is 2.
Michael King is also 1.
Oh, he's also 1. Wow. Why did I think one of those guys was 2? Okay,
you're the pitcher guy. You're supposed to know these things.
Sorry. I didn't know that. I thought one of them had 2 years. I was thinking of trading Shaw for the guy that has 2 years control, a little more attractive. In this case, no, you're not trading any of these guys for 1 year of either of those.
Yeah, and we already did that with Tucker, and so all right.
Yeah,
I'm being greedy. I want to make sure that our fans have the opportunity to ask questions. So Ty, take it away. What do we got in the questions?
We got a lot of good ones. I think actually a very great one to start off with is from our good friend Sean, which I think just kind of leads in just the discussion of, what kind of message is Tom/Jed sending our fan base by signing Bregman after talking about breaking even?
I mean, I don't know. Those comments are what they are. I'm not going to comment on them. Everybody has opinions, and all the opinions are very clear, I think, from a lot of people in the industry and stuff. I mean, it's a move that signals that they actually are trying to compete with, I think, the Dodgers and these other teams. Like the Mets are going to be a powerhouse. Like I understand the rotation's somewhat semi-fragile, but like that team is going to be terrifying, I think. Like I think Holmes is really good. So it's like you have to step up. Like winning the division is cool. That'd be great. But like the goal is to get to like the CS in the World Series, Like if I'm in this organization, like getting into the playoffs is not necessarily a W to me. Like getting in, winning a series, and then moving on is probably a W. You think of like 2015 to 16, they get to the CS and then they jump to the World Series the next year. It's like it doesn't all need to happen in 1 year. Obviously, we'd love the Cubs to win the World Series, but trying to be a little more realistic, like they got to the CS, that's a very successful season in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you're gonna have to get past one of those teams, probably the Dodgers, the Mets, and like those teams are loaded. If the Braves bounce back, like that team's loaded. And I think as it currently stands, like you don't have Bregman, like you need Shaw to be like a 3-win player in order to compete with those teams. And if that doesn't happen, then like you are hamstrung against, I think, 3 or 4 teams in the NL. But adding Bregman in, to me, like really solidifies their opportunity to go up against one of those teams and have it draw a little bit more even. And then it also maybe gives you an opportunity from a monetary perspective. I'd love to see like a trade for another front-end starter mid-deadline. You think of like Sandy, Alcantara, Pablo Lopez if the Twins are out of it, Castillo if the Mariners are out of it. I imagine some of those teams are probably going to be competitive, so there's probably are hard deals to swing. But I do think, like, again, like the pieces that would push this team over the top to me are like another big bat, which is Bregman, and then another front, like 2 to 3 starter, and that is a Lopez, a Castillo, a Sandy Alcantara, etc. That puts you up against the Dodgers and the Mets and gives you a much better chance of winning.
Fantastic. We got another one here that I think kind of is nice in reference to the conversation we're having right now, from Kyle, with the CBA set to expire in December of 2026. Is this affecting teams wanting to sign long-term contracts with top players, obviously with the Cubs?
That's interesting. I can't say I've thought too much about that. I wonder if that plays into a bit on like the Dodgers deferrals. That's also probably just the fact that they just have a lot of money and are willing to kind of push it down the road. But I wonder whether they're almost expecting like a larger luxury tax jump to some extent, and they're more tolerant of like being able to outbid some of these, like the Tanner Scott situation where seems like maybe the Cubs came close in terms of the monetary side, but like even if the Cubs came close, like the Dodgers probably would have just been like, yeah, there's another $2 million a year. Like, it doesn't really matter. We're going to keep going up. So I wonder whether it affects some teams. I don't think I have a great answer. That's a good question. I think I'd honestly have to defer to someone who maybe has a better idea of what would happen in the new CBA. Like, is there something that I'm missing? Like, does the luxury tax jump a ton and you run into what the NBA did, where like you have all of a sudden everyone is getting paid minimum of $14 million a year? You know what I mean? Even if you're not good. I don't think it's gonna be that dramatic, because that was aligned more with a TV deal. But perhaps it could be. Perhaps management figures out some of these blackout issues in the next year or two, and then you have a large national TV revenue jump, or they take back more league rights and resell them to like an Amazon Prime or something along those lines, where it's like you then have a really nice inflow of cash to the teams and the luxury tax jumps up, and then all these contracts look totally fine. This is probably the theory to some extent around the Mets signing Soto, which is like this CBA really makes a difference, and then the 41 and whatever he's getting paid doesn't really matter. It's like that looks small, you know what I mean, relative to what you think. So yeah, I'm kind of talking through my thoughts on it as I ramble here, but
when
I don't
had
have a great
Jesse
answer.
on, Jesse in his article said that he believes that there is a lot of stuff that the Cubs are not going to be doing any sort of mega deals before the next CBA. So
Okay,
I still don't quite understand all the semantics behind it, but that's what Jesse had said.
Yeah, I'll defer to Jesse. I think he's probably got very good tapped into that space for sure.
Lance, let's kind of touch on, really, obviously we talk a lot about the players that are coming in, but we don't really talk about what the success we had last year, right? And there's a great question from Brandon here. Do you think Shota can repeat what he did last year, or is it inevitable he falls a little short, assuming a park factor regression, which has been obviously a topic of discussion for a while?
I hope he can. My answer and gut say no. I just don't think there's any way he's sub 3 again for 170. I think that'd be the reason that would happen is just the park plays as pitcher friendly as it did this year, which, based on everything we see from like a rolling average standpoint on the park factor, isn't going to happen unless something changed. Like sometimes when these things change, you have like a structural difference in the stadium. I think of the Guardians last year taking down, I believe it was this portion of their concourse in right field, and that creating a draft that pulled balls out, and all the lefties started hitting 20 plus homers. Like Jose Ramirez and Steven Kwan, etc. Like that was a structural change in the stadium that changed the wind pattern, you know? I don't think that really happened at Wrigley. From walking by it every day, I didn't notice anything go up or come down. And like maybe there is something that changes in the next couple of years, but I expect this park to play more neutral next year. And Shota had a near 1.5 homer per nine, which is high. So like I just think he's going to run into some more homer issues. And there isn't anything that's glaring there from like it's really obvious he'll add this pitch or this to his mix to help stave off some of that regression. Now, do I think he's going to be a bad pitcher? No. But like if he's a 3.6 over 170, I think that's a successful season for sure. And that is 0.7 regression on his ERA. So it's definitely a worse season, but I think that's fine. Like I would take a 3.6. If you're telling me like I will give you a 3.6 from Shota over 170 innings right now, I would take that in a heartbeat. It'd be like that's totally fine. Like that's kind of what I expect him to maybe end up at. So like I'm not going to push and assume that he's a sub 3 again. But yeah, the park factor regression is a great point. Like I think Jed in his end of season presser said that he seemed to allude, I thought at least, to saying that when the Cubs were on the road, the wind patterns were more neutral, and it just so happened that when they were playing at home, the wind patterns were pitcher friendly. And I don't know if they like actually track that. And I'm kind of paraphrasing what I thought he said or was implying. So I wonder whether they kind of expected to just be more neutral of a park. And if it's more neutral of a park, then like, yeah, I would say I'm slightly worried about the rotation if it's a more neutral of a park. Like you have, again, as we're talking about here, like a lot of guys that are not going to be able to dominate over 170 innings. You're kind of piecing together a bunch of 130s on the back half, aside from Steele and Shota. So yeah, I mean, your regression from Tyone, Boyd, I like a lot on a per inning basis, but again, how many is he throwing? There's a lot of questions. Like if this season goes awry, it's probably because pitchers get hurt in the rotation. The park plays neutral, and they don't really have the bullets to backfill, and they're really struggling to it'll be one of those things where you look at the win loss on Steele Shota days, and it's like great, and then everyone else, it's like ugh, that's the problem. Last year was the bullpen. This year, it's the fact that like you can't you're not totally getting great consistency from the 3 through the 5 in the rotation. That's my gut right now. Again, I'll reserve the right to change that as the season goes on, but that's my gut right now.
Lance, really quick before we ask the next question, are you still tight on time at the top of the hour?
Yeah, I could do it a couple more. I'd like to bounce it a bit if possible.
Yeah. Let's pick maybe a couple that he can do some rapid fire answers to here, and then maybe a couple.
That 40 minutes went quick. Jeez.
I personally shout out Jack. This is an incredible question. It would just be an electric Jeff Passan tweet. But Nico for Gavin Williams and a comp pick. Quick reaction to that.
I mean, there's no way the Guardians take that, but I would absolutely love it. Yes.
Really quick, just back. I did want to ask this question just about the 6-man rotation. You alluded to it earlier, talking about, going to that right away, giving a little bit more depth. Obviously, depth is a big piece of the Cubs roster this upcoming season, but can you see them going to a 6-man here, even at the start of the season?
Yeah, I'd say cool idea. I imagine they've talked about it internally. As to whether they actually do it, I would lean probably not. But I think it's a great point. I guess I hadn't thought about that in terms of just like being able to save some bullets from guys and to kind of do what the Dodgers are doing, My gut is maybe because the quality of the depth of rotation isn't as strong as the Dodgers, where they're 5 and 6 and 7, or like probably 4s and 3s in most rotations. You're a little more confident in stretching that out. Whereas like with the Cubs, like if you're trying to get to 90, 95 wins, like you kind of need Steele every 5th, and you maybe need Shota every 5th, So it'd be a little weird to be like, okay, we have these guys on this schedule, 2 guys are on a 5-man, and then these 4 are on 6-man. Like I just don't think that works. It works with the Dodgers again because of the quality of that like 6th starter. It makes sense from an injury prevention standpoint. I'm worried that internally they would look at it and go, it's a good idea from an injury prevention standpoint, but we think the overall production of our pitching would be lower, giving more starts, more of that pie, as I talked about, to pitchers that aren't as good as Steele and Shota. That's the concern there. It's like a balancing act, right? It's like, okay, healthier, but worse. And it's like, I might want better, but less healthy and take some shots that our pitching department can get Birdsell, Horton, Brown, et cetera, up here and contributing at a high level. So good question. I would say no is my ultimate answer.
Ty, before you ask the last question or two, guys, I just want to let you know right after this at 7:30 Central Time, we are going to be going live in our Facebook group called Cubs Talk. Ty is going to put that link right down in the comments right now. If you're not a part of that Facebook group, you're going to want to be a part of it because we do essentially think about live sports radio. You get to come up on stage, you get to share, you get to rant, you get to do your best Harry Carey impression, whatever you want to do. We're having fun starting at 7:30 in that Facebook group. So just want to give that quick plug. Ty, let's nail down one really good question to end this thing.
I think this is a fantastic one from Justin. I think really the bullpen is very, very heavy righty at this point. You talk about Luke Little, you talk about Thielbar. Are you worried about it? Any concerns? Oh, by the way, congratulations, brother. Happy for you. So I just want to make sure I said that as well.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, I think there's some moderate concern, especially because in the past you had like the de facto lefty and Leiter Jr., who was the split guy. Honestly, maybe this makes that thinking of that point maybe brings up the higher probability that Ben Brown's using leverage because like his curveball shape will work versus lefties. It's just the shape of that pitch, as Zombra talked about, as you had him on, is like a death ball. It's very straight down. It's very platoon neutral. So you could use it versus righties and versus lefties. It's not a splitter. It's similar in a way to a splitter. Those sliders with less sweep are generally good in multiple situations, as opposed to like Porter Hodges sweeper is not great versus lefties. You don't generally want to throw that a lot. Which is why I want Hodge to throw a splitter as much as possible. But we'll see if he actually does that this season. And I was ragging on him for that in CubsCon. He was laughing. But yeah, I guess I'm slightly worried for sure. I think this is probably why like Tanner Scott made so much sense, like, and they went after him. Like he would have been a beautiful piece for this bullpen and just really nailed everything down. I think they got a great, like I love Presley and I like the idea of adding Brader and stuff. So it's like they did a good job like salvaging what they probably intended to do, like a plan B plus as opposed to their A plan of getting Scott. Yeah, I'd say I am concerned. I don't really know what the remedy is either. I'm trying to think of like literal. We got to see on the health side. Again, that's another one we'll know in a week or two when we get reports on like people asking counsel, et cetera, where he is. Otherwise, yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Like I don't know what the fix is is just relying on like Julian Merriweather's changeup versus lefties. Yeah, I'm not totally confident they're going to be able to dominate lefties.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like Eli Morgan is kind of a lighter, but throws a little bit harder.
Yeah. Maybe that goes back to my point of like, you want to use him in? Sorry for interrupting you. Like use him in leverage, like
right.
Maybe they need to because they don't have a lefty killer, and that's just how lineup shakes out. So
yeah,
it's an interesting question. Yeah, I'd say I am concerned if you're making the answer yes or no there. Yeah, I am.
All right, Lance. I'm bummed that you're not going to be at spring training the same time as me, but I'm getting on the road tomorrow. I'll make you feel like you're there, brother. And for all of you out there that are just dying for some spring training action, make sure you check out our YouTube channel because starting Friday, I'm going to be posting a ton. Ty and I will be out there at times as well. So Lance, thanks so much, man. As always, these weekly lives are a lot of fun. So thanks, man.
They're a blast. Thanks for having me. Have fun in AZ.
Thanks.